Giants come back and pick up their tackle. It's Evan Neal. We talked about this when we discussed the Kayvon Thibodeau pick. I think the Giants played it right. You get Thibodeau, who you're not going to find other Thibodeaus at 5. You had multiple tackles to choose from. Personally, I like Evan Neal the best out of him, Ike Ekwonu, and Charles Cross. So we went through so many pre-draft scenarios. What can the Giants do at 5 and at 7? There was definitely some point in our podcast where this was the scenario. And I love it. We came out of it saying, if this is what happens, the Giants should be thrilled, and the Giants should absolutely be thrilled.
Well, the first interesting point is they didn't trade back, right? We speculated that the Giants would be one of those teams that could be open for business with one of these first-round picks, trade into next year, position themselves for a quarterback. They didn't pick up Daniel Jones' fifth-year option. Jones might be there for one more year, and then they're in the QB market. So they didn't do that. They actually stayed where they were, and they capitalized on the value of Kayvon Thibodeau being there and Evan Neal being there. And these are two guys that were both at one point in the betting favorite to be number 1 overall, right? At one stage in the process, each one of those two guys at number 5 and number 7 overall were the favorite to be the number 1 overall pick.
For a reason, right? I mean, there's a reason why they were in that conversation.
Right. And to get both of them at those spots can only be seen as a fantastic result for the Giants. They definitely needed an offensive lineman. They didn't have the kind of salary cap flexibility to do what some other teams did and go shopping and overhaul the offensive line in free agency. They're going to have to rely on the draft to fill some of those spots. Andrew Thomas last year took a big step forward in year 2. Evan Neal should be able to come in, has the experience, the previous college experience of playing on both sides of the line. So is a more natural or more confident fit you would have in flipping sides of the line, playing right tackle. And yeah, that has to be a good thing.
Yeah, look, we spend a lot of time on the podcast talking about here's a few free agents and here are the draft picks and how do you fix an offensive line? Almost starting from scratch. The only guy you truly trusted was Andrew Thomas. You bring in a Mark Lewinsky to play right guard. Neal, again, probably slots in at right tackle.
Yep.
John Feliciano comes in to compete. Max Garcia comes in to compete. I mean, they've got much more talent now on the offensive line than they've had previously. And I think when you look at Neal as the prospect, when you describe the top 3 tackles, Ike Ekwonu, Evan Neal, Charles Cross, when you looked at Cross, you were like, pass protector only, run game questions. Ike, run game guy, pass protection questions. Evan Neal's the best combination of both. The only guy at the grade in the 80s in both facets over the last couple of years. So that's why I liked Evan Neal as the best all-around tackle here.
Yeah, and look, we also need to talk about what a physical specimen this guy is.
Incredible.
Right? Yeah. He is like 6'7", 6'8", 340 pounds. And when he was at the combine, stood up in the podium, he looked like a tight end. Like, you cannot believe that this guy weighed in at upwards of 330 pounds. He genuinely looked like he weighed 250, 260. I mean, he looked like you, for God's sake. Like that dude.
Wait, is that good or bad? Is that a compliment for him or me? Or
I'm just putting it out there, right? You and him did not have a dissimilar body type when he's standing up there at the podium.
And he's got 60 pounds on me.
Right. That's absurd. And he's carrying like a ridiculous amount of weight. So for him to be able to move like he does, he's got some spectacular tape. He has history of playing both sides of the line. He's good at run blocking and pass protection. Probably the best composite of the top tackles in terms of their skill sets. He should be able to come in day one, solidify the right side of that line, and at least give them bookends of quality tackles. Now they still have work to do inside, but look, we got to start somewhere when we're overhauling an offensive line.
We've spent a lot of time over the last few years saying, give Sam Darnold an offensive line. Now we want Joe Burrow to have an offensive line. Give Tua an offensive line and prove it. This is giving Daniel Jones the offensive line. It might be his last year, or it might be the year that he takes the step forward. On paper, the playmakers are still good for the Giants. On paper, the offensive line is much better. Evan Neal moves them forward for sure, even as a rookie. So we're starting to get into this whole, all right, Daniel Jones time. This will be your best supporting cast in year 4. This is huge.
Yeah, and look, it's also for the future, right? Because we know that offensive linemen often take a couple of years to develop. And Evan Neal might not be great year 1. It might be year 2 or year 3 where we finally get to see the high-end talent, at which point it's going to be the new QB's gig, It's going to be whoever the next guy is coming in, and there's actually a ready-made offensive line for him, right? If it helps Daniel Jones now, great. But honestly, that might not be the biggest motivator for the Giants. They might be, look, whenever we get the new quarterback, if we've given up on Daniel Jones, this guy's going to need a better offensive line than we currently have. So either way, it needs to be fixed. And if it has the byproduct of giving us something in Daniel Jones, all the better.
hey, we're all just projecting here at this point. But I think if you're a Giants fan, you have a new regime from top to bottom. I think you have to be encouraged by their first round, by what they get in Kayvon Thibodeau, by what they get in Evan Neal. I think the value and need match up, and the Giants look like they're moving in the right direction.
I mean, look, we're recording these as we go through the night, but this is already going to take some beating in terms of a first round for the Giants. Like, they have gotten two players that would have been extremely high on their draft board if they could pick just two players in the draft. If you just told them, the whole draft, you've got picks number 1 and 2, who are you taking? They might not have taken two different players.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think huge win for the Giants. Really liking what they're doing so far.